Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the medical science behind what is arguably one of the most heavily debated topics in men's health right now. Some folks will confidently tell you that modern digital habits are completely harmless, while others swear they're literally destroying relationships. So we're going to cut right through all that internet noise, skip the personal anecdotes, and just look purely at what the science actually says. It really boils down to one simple question. Can watching porn actually cause erectile dysfunction? Online forums are just filled with extreme opinions and conflicting stories on this, so today we're taking an impartial step back. We're going to look at what the biopsychosocial model actually tells us about this incredibly complex issue, relying strictly on current medical evidence. To do that, we'll be walking through 5 clinical steps. We've got defining erectile dysfunction, the brain and novelty, correlation versus causation, the anxiety cycle, and finally, a holistic medical approach. All right, starting with number 1, defining erectile dysfunction. Now, to really grasp this, we have to look at the clinical definition. It's the persistent inability to achieve or maintain an erection sufficient for satisfactory sexual activity. The absolutely crucial word here is persistent. Let's be real, practically every guy experiences temporary difficulties at some point, whether it's from stress, terrible sleep, having one too many drinks, or just getting distracted. One bad night doesn't mean you have ED. Medically speaking, it has to be an ongoing, persistent problem. Erections are actually one of the most complex physiological functions in the human body. It's like a symphony. Your brain, nerves, blood vessels, hormones, and emotions all have to play together perfectly. While older men often face physical vascular issues like cardiovascular disease or diabetes, younger men usually experience ED that's driven heavily by psychological factors. Think performance anxiety, depression, or chronic stress. So even if a younger guy is physically in peak condition, his brain can still completely disrupt the whole process. Moving on to section 2, the brain and novelty. We can't talk about the brain without talking about dopamine. You've probably heard it called the pleasure chemical, right? Well, that's actually kind of incomplete. It's really a motivation, learning, and reward chemical. It spikes naturally during everyday survival activities, eating a phenomenal meal, crushing a workout, winning a game, learning something cool, and of course, sex. Pornography? Well, it activates this exact same reward system. But here's the real kicker, and what makes the modern internet so unique compared to, say, a magazine from 30 years ago? It's the unlimited access to novelty. This triggers a biological phenomenon known as the Coolidge effect. Basically, mammals show a massive spike in sexual motivation when they're introduced to a new partner or novel stimuli. Today, with just a swipe on a smartphone, you can instantly switch to a completely different scenario. This rapid-fire novelty keeps the brain's reward system engaged way longer than natural intimacy ever would. Now, here is where the medical consensus gets really interesting. You've probably seen the term porn-induced erectile dysfunction, or PIED, thrown around online. A lot of guys report that they can easily get an erection while looking at a screen, but struggle during real-life intimacy, and they often say it gets better when they stop watching. But major urological organizations do not currently recognize PIED as an official medical diagnosis. That absolutely doesn't mean these guys are lying about what they're going through. It just means that, scientifically, there isn't enough consistent evidence yet to classify it as its own distinct medical disorder. Which brings us to section 3, correlation versus causation. Let's look at this analogy because it hits the nail right on the head. We know that people carrying umbrellas are way more likely to be standing in the rain. But did the umbrellas cause the rain? Obviously not. The rain caused people to grab their umbrellas. It's the exact same logic here. If researchers see that heavy porn users report more erectile problems, it doesn't automatically prove the porn caused the issue. It could be that men are watching more porn because real-life intimacy feels way too stressful, or they might turn to screens after they start having erectile problems. Without super rigorous studies, it's really hard to untangle which came first. Over the past decade, researchers have combined multiple studies into these massive systematic reviews, and honestly, the results are pretty inconsistent. Some studies find zero meaningful association at all, others find super weak links. Where they do tend to find stronger connections is usually among younger men who use pornography very frequently, especially if that use becomes compulsive. So the overall clinical takeaway is cautious. Porn doesn't directly cause ED in most men, but excessive use definitely can contribute to difficulties for some guys. It's absolutely not a one-size-fits-all situation. And this ties right into how our brains adapt, which we call sexual conditioning. Frequency is a huge deal here. Watching something occasionally is a whole different ballgame than consuming it for hours on end every single day. For some people, that repetitive, intense consumption leads the brain to associate arousal specifically with extreme stimulation, constant novelty, and rapid scene changes. Over time, a guy's arousal might actually become conditioned to depend on a screen rather than, say, emotional intimacy or a physical touch. All right, let's look at Section 4, the anxiety cycle. We have to keep reminding ourselves that pornography is highly edited entertainment. Just like a big action movie, it's designed to completely exaggerate reality. You've got perfect lighting, specific camera angles, heavy editing, and literal hours of filming chopped down into just a few minutes. Real human relationships look absolutely nothing like this. They're unedited, emotional, and rely on communication. When someone repeatedly compares themselves or their partner to these totally unrealistic portrayals, it can trigger some severe performance anxiety and dissatisfaction. And that creates a really vicious psychological loop. A lot of people don't realize that erections actually begin in the brain, not the body. The brain is constantly evaluating safety and stress. If you start worrying about your performance, your brain feels that pressure and pumps out stress hormones like adrenaline. And guess what? Adrenaline literally narrows your blood vessels, which directly kills an erection. Then, because it didn't work out, the next encounter feels even more terrifying. The cycle just feeds itself. Often, porn just becomes this easy, low-pressure escape from that awful anxiety loop. This leads us to our final part, Section 5, Holistic Medical Approach. If you or someone you know is dealing with this, the absolute first step is simple. Don't panic. Pornography is rarely the sole culprit. The single most important thing you can do is get a comprehensive medical evaluation. Why? Because persistent ED can actually be a really important early warning sign for much deeper physical conditions. We're talking about things like diabetes, cardiovascular disease, hormonal imbalances, medication side effects, or even sleep disorders. A doctor needs to rule all of that out before assuming it's just psychological. Now, if a doctor does rule out those physical causes, they're going to look at the whole picture. The medical community strongly recommends a holistic approach to treat your overall lifestyle and mental well-being. We're talking about the fundamentals here: getting better sleep, exercising regularly, actively managing your stress, and putting effort into your emotional relationships. Addressing that performance anxiety, whether that's through therapy or just having an honest, open conversation with your partner, is often a total game changer for sexual function. So, what about the screen time itself? Well, for those who feel like their habits have kind of gotten out of control, doing an experiment with moderation or taking a temporary pause is actually considered a very reasonable step. Some guys report huge improvements in their desire, arousal, and confidence when they cut back, while others don't really notice much of a difference at all. Individual responses are all over the map, which is exactly why researchers are still studying this so intensely. Ultimately, neither extreme of this massive internet debate is totally accurate. Screaming that porn always causes ED is just factually false, but claiming it never affects erections totally ignores the reality of compulsive behavior and anxiety. Healthy sexuality is all about balance. It's balancing emotional connection, physical well-being, and healthy habits. The goal here isn't to live in fear of your phone or media, but to build some real self-awareness and prioritize genuine human connection. By understanding the actual science, we can finally step away from the internet fear-mongering and the dramatic myths and actually make informed decisions for ourselves. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with something to really chew on. Are you treating your sexual health like it's just some isolated mechanical function, or are you treating it as a true reflection of your complete physical and emotional well-being? Think about the whole picture. Thanks so much for joining me today.